Welcome to our webcast, 4 Steps to Becoming an HR Analytics Champion. We're so excited to have you join us today. My name is Sarah O'Brien, and I lead LinkedIn's Global Insights capability. My team is responsible for leveraging LinkedIn's data to help companies acquire and develop talent and grow their businesses. Many of the insights created by my team have been developed into our new self-serve analytics offering, Talent Insights, which you will hear about later. Prior to LinkedIn, I played leadership roles in the advanced analytics practice and the tech media telecom practice at Bain & Company, a strategy consulting firm, where I helped companies across the world become data-driven organizations. I'm joined here by David Green.
Sarah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. For those that don't know me, my name's David Green. I've been in the HR talent acquisition space for most of the last 20 years, and in the last 5 years within the people analytics space. So I work for a company called Insight 222, and we work directly with people analytics leaders and their teams to have more impact with data-driven insights within their organizations and make sure that they're using the data in an ethical and wise way. I'm also very fortunate. I get to speak a lot about people analytics, traveling the conference circuit around the world. And in fact, that's why I'm in the Bay Area this week, because I'll be co-chairing the People Analytics and Future of Work conference later this week, which I believe you're speaking at.
I am. I'm very excited. I'll be speaking with Al Adamson on using people data for good. So very excited about that. We're excited for the webinar today, but before we dive in, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone's microphones are muted by default. We want to hear your questions, thoughts, and comments though, so please be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A window on the left side of your webcast window. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the webcast. At LinkedIn, we consider feedback a gift, so please feel free to share your feedback in the survey console after the session. It's a quick survey, and we read all the responses. Your feedback helps curate even better content for you in the future. Finally, we'll be sharing out the recording and slides after the webcast, so you can view and share with your team and colleagues as you like. Should you have any technical issues during the webcast, use the chat feature, and our team will work to fix it. With all that covered, let's get started.
So let's take a look at the agenda that we're going to cover today. And basically, I think you'd agree with me, Sarah, the need for high-performing talent has never been greater. We're living and working in perhaps the most disruptive times any of us have experienced. So it's becoming even more important to leverage all that data that we've got in human resources. But certainly in my experience, building a data-driven function or a people analytics team across covering every dimension of HR, from talent acquisition, performance, and workforce planning, and retention, all to solve business challenges that your organization has, can be a very complex and challenging thing.
Exactly. And that's why earlier this year, LinkedIn ran an analysis of the data on our platform and conducted in-depth research sessions with top HR leaders in industries like retail, tech, finance, and government all across the globe to unearth the latest trends in talent analytics and gather color into how companies are tackling their journeys in developing talent analytics capabilities. In this webcast, we'll be sharing these findings, including everything from the state of adoption to how to answer your toughest talent questions with data and analytics. We'll start with a broader look at the rate of adoption of talent analytics, which will cover why we're seeing such a significant rise in the last few years. We will also discuss how early adopters are using data and insights for both traditional and more unique use cases. Then we'll outline what you can do to build a data-driven culture in your organization. Lastly, we'll cover how you can apply analytics to answer talent questions like, who are my emerging talent competitors? And how can I ensure that my talent brand will hold up to attract and develop the right candidates?
Thanks, Sarah. So let's get into the thick of it. What does the landscape of analytics in HR look like? Well, certainly something that I've seen particularly over the last 18 months people analytics has really started to surge forward. And one thing we want to highlight really off the bat is that the conversations about applying data analytics to HR measurement isn't new. This has been around for quite a while. The interest levels and adoption levels have certainly increased, and there's a buzz about the space now, which is fantastic. And again, the reality is that one of the most important assets of a company is its people data. So, I've been in this space for 5 years, but certainly been talking about it for 10 years, I think. Organizations are at different maturity levels when it comes to people analytics adoption. Even though analytics has been on the minds of HR leaders and business leaders for some time, it's only really in the last 5 years, certainly if we're looking at North America, that we've seen a 3 times increase in HR professionals who list analytics skills and keywords on their LinkedIn profiles. And while many HR professionals leverage analytics and data as part of their general HR role, we're seeing an increasing number now of professionals focusing primarily on an HR analytics, and I'm seeing some of these teams really grow quite significantly. There's a number of names for these teams: talent analytics, people analytics, workforce analytics, HR analytics, talent insights, people insights. And particularly we're seeing these teams emerge at larger, more forward-thinking enterprise companies.
Interesting. So you see tremendous growth in the last 5 years in North America. What about in other regions across the globe?
Well, I think that's the beauty of your research, because you did 3 regional reports. So if we look at EMEA, we saw a 61% increase in just a single year of the number of professionals on LinkedIn with HR analytics in their profile. And similar to North America, over a 5-year span in APAC, we saw an increase of 70% as well. Put all these trends together, it's a signal that we've really started to reach a tipping point with people analytics. It's only to become more and more integrated into the way that HR teams are building their strategies. And maybe a few years ago, the analytics team was sitting on the periphery of HR. We're now really seeing it move towards the centre and driving HR strategy moving forward. As I said, the trend isn't new, but what is new is the rate of growth. So we're going to look at a few things and try to understand what's behind the growth, why now, and how it's impacting the way organisations are leveraging people analytics.
Fantastic. So let's talk about some of the drivers.
Well, so I'll take the first one. So I think the first driver of this growth is the relationship between the CEO and the CHRO. Key questions on talent are top of mind for CEOs, as organisations almost seem to be in a perpetual state of transformation and continually reinventing themselves, developing new products and services. If we look at the PwC CEO survey from 2018, 77% of CEOs believe that the biggest threat to their business is the lack of availability of key skills. And with CEOs so concerned about talent, they're putting some of that pressure on talent teams and CHROs to help plan for the workforce of the future. As many of our listeners and viewers will know, when you're trying to develop your retention strategy, build a pipeline of stellar candidates, find that key hire that could transform your business, understand how teams get things done within organisations. You want to use everything that you can within your toolkit. And HR data and people analytics can help answer many of those critical concerns that CHROs must grapple with. We're going to talk about some of those later, but we're going to talk a little bit about diversity. We're going to talk a bit about geolocation decisions. We're going to talk about hiring strategy and competitive benchmarking, workforce planning and employer branding, really the breadth of HR.
Exactly right. And as talent becomes more of a CEO level topic, we also see the HR tech landscape innovating to be able to meet the demand. So the second driver of talent analytics adoption is the growth of HR tech and innovation. For anyone who's been to an HR tech conference recently, you will have noticed the expansion of vendor offerings across really all aspects of the HR lifecycle. While that means that the landscape may seem more fragmented and complex than ever, there's also an unprecedented amount of innovation happening. The development that I'm personally most excited about is the shift towards making data and analytics more accessible. In the past, it was much more difficult to get data, especially the relevant data you needed to answer the questions you cared most about. Even sorting through internal data in an organization was quite challenging. you needed a full team with really specialized skills like data mining and coding languages like SAS and R that a lot of companies just didn't have. The model wasn't as scalable or accessible for the recruiter or the average HR VP. But what I'm excited about is that the static HR management systems of the past are now moving towards much more dynamic, real-time, cloud and mobile-based tools and platforms. What that means for talent leaders is that getting the data you need is becoming much more about clicks than code. Since that data doesn't require as much work to manipulate, now what you have to be is just a problem solver in order to get to know the right questions to ask the data and therefore be able to make sense of the data.
Yeah. And I think the third area that we just want to highlight at the start really here, I think this is something that talent professionals feel pretty acutely, is that we're working in an increasingly competitive landscape. We have more data as HR organisations, but so do candidates as well. And that limited pool of top talent, plus lots of efforts by many companies to recruit within that talent pool, creates even more scarcity for the talent that you need most. And what people analytics can do and what data can really do is it can give you that competitive edge. It can support more impactful conversations for recruiters and HR professionals with the business. And we're seeing more companies use predictive analytics to help build and manage great teams. And we're also seeing them use analytics to give insights to individuals and managers about their own behaviours as well, and how that potentially impacts on performance and well-being of those around them as well. We talked about how the rate of people analytics adoption has grown over the last 5 years, and particularly in the last year. And there's still an opportunity to become one of the early adopters to help shape this new trend within HR.
This is really exciting because if you look at these three drivers, it's not just about what's driving the increase in numbers, it's also completely changing the role of an HR professional and making the HR team much closer to the business and making really important decisions. So with that, let's talk about the state of adoption.
Let's look at some of the results. So, and I think just to your point, HR, it's an exciting place to work. It's arguably one of the most exciting places to work in the business at the moment. But there's a lot of change going on and a lot of challenge for HR professionals to learn and acquire new skills. And as we see from the data itself, and this was across all organisations of all shape and size, 22% of companies have now adopted HR analytics. But not only this, the companies, they've built teams as well. And certainly a lot of the teams I work with are scaling quite considerably at the moment as well. So it's clear that the adoption of people analytics is happening quickly. But, that data seems to suggest it's not quite table stakes yet for a majority of companies across North America. And so I think we're going to now look at some of the sectors. So we did some analysis of the sectors, or LinkedIn did some analysis of the top sectors in HR. And here are the top 6 that are leading the charge. I'm sure, like me, you weren't that surprised to see that tech and finance are at the top. Makes sense. There's already a high emphasis on quantitative data within those sectors. And probably also within many of those organisations, a culture of data within the organisation. People are comfortable using data to help make decisions. And that definitely helps HR organisations that want to ramp up their people analytics functions. Another sector there that's come out quite high is oil and energy. And that makes sense as well. Certainly the oil and energy companies that I work with, they've got a particularly research and academic-led initiative to how they work. And they also tend to have larger HR organisations as well.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, this data comes from the LinkedIn platform, and it's inclusive of all sizes of companies. If you were to look only at larger companies, you would probably see adoption rates significantly higher than what's shown here, as large organizations tend to have more scale and resourcing to dedicate to HR analytics.
Yeah, and I can certainly give an example of that. So the Corporate Research Forum in the UK, they did a survey back at the end of 2017, and they found that 69% of large organisations, those with 10,000 or more employees, now have a people analytics team. And although I think some of those people analytics teams are probably doing reporting, and it's just a case of them being rebranded, it shows that the appetite are there and that this is something that's really moving forward. And what I was quite interested there, and I see a really big opportunity, is in the retail space. It's an area where I'm seeing quite a lot of growth in people analytics. There's a lot of emphasis on data from the consumer side, and that's starting to translate now across to the workforce as well. And if we think that a lot of the people that work in retail organizations are actually interfacing directly with customers, I think there's a big opportunity there for that sector to use data more within the people space. And that's the important thing. To really optimize, you've got to tie this to business performance. However much data you've got on, people data you've got, you've really got to focus on answering some of those key business questions for your organizations.
So let's dive into that now that we've talked a little bit about adoption rates.
Yeah, so let's look at what some of the leaders and early adopters are using people analytics for. Let's look at some of the top use cases in some of the key metropolitan areas in the US.
Perfect. So in this research, we looked deeper into the data to unearth adoption patterns by use case for a few of the biggest metro areas in North America. You can see here the top 10 use cases that popped for New York, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. First thing that jumped out at me, in each city, compensation and benefits is the #1 use case. It's not particularly surprising given the inherently quantitative nature of compensation and benchmarking and benefits and the long-standing practices of compensation benchmarking. I think this field is changing though, and we actually saw it in our Talent Trends report, which was released yesterday, where pay transparency is becoming a much bigger trend. And so we start to see compensation and benefits shifting from being a more inwardly facing discipline for HR analytics functions to being more of a market-driven and something that is more candidate-driven in the way that compensation and benefits analytics is playing out. Productivity and performance rounds out the second most frequent use case across the board. Another newer use case we're seeing grow is the analytics for culture and diversity strategy. This is a really interesting one because historically it's been hard to put numbers behind this, but there's a ton of momentum. You will see here, particularly in San Francisco, where culture and diversity is now the #3 top use case for analytics. Why? I think there are a few things driving it. First, building inclusive teams is top of mind for companies and their HR leadership in a way that wasn't the case 5 years ago. It isn't just about having diverse talent for the sake of having diverse talent. Diversity and talent is critical towards actually being able to build products that companies can then have global reach with. Because the tech companies are building platforms that have this global reach and need to reach more diverse audiences. By having products that aren't just built by folks that look and think all the same, then they will be much more effective in their overall business strategy. Combine that with the skills gap for tech talent that's happening right now, then by expanding into more diverse talent pools, you can open up new avenues and potentially find new candidates that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. But you can't fully impact what you can't measure. And so there's been this huge momentum that has prompted a new wave of innovation and measurement for culture and diversity. From a gender diversity lens, companies are using our Talent Insights product to benchmark their gender representation across various types of talent against their local market or against their industry to be able to understand whether their starting point is one that's strong or weak. Companies are also doing really innovative stuff with their own data, whether that be analyzing keywords in job posts and application requirements to see how various types of applicants respond, whether that be companies analyzing employee behavior and sentiment for key moments that matter, such as parental leave, to help inform the policies that they create. Talent acquisition continues to be a strong use case as well, and actually a lot of the examples I gave with respect to culture and diversity are different subsets of talent acquisition. Another one I'd like to point out is workforce planning. This is another area where predictive modeling is becoming increasingly important. As the shelf life of skills is decreasing, Companies are looking to new types of data to ensure that their workforce are equipped to develop and grow the skills that they will need in the future, not just those that they have worked for them historically. So being able to rely on data to understand skills that are emerging in their company or in their industry that they will need to get ahead of will help companies with their workforce strategy. As I look at the list, one that I'm a bit surprised isn't higher is employer branding, but I suspect this will change going forward. The employer brand movement is still quite new. And initially, a lot of it was around how do I identify the message for my company that we need to be rallying around? And what should be our employee value proposition and how should that translate to candidates? And that is inherently more qualitative at the outset. But then as data becomes a more ingrained process and if you start to see more marketeers enter into the landscape of employer brand, then we start to see companies asking questions like, how is my brand resonating with internal employees, external candidates? How does that differ by talent pool? How do I think about targeting my brand investment? And across this entire spectrum, there's a huge opportunity to leverage data. So David, as you look at the use cases, anything else pop out at you?
Well, I think before I talk about retention, I think one thing that's really quite good about this, and this is, I think, the really big opportunity for people analytics and some of those things on the list. You know, in HR, we've been talking about the importance of employee engagement, the importance of culture and diversity for a long time. And some business leaders get it, other business leaders a little bit more convincing. And I think with analytics and data, we can actually start to show the business benefits of this. Not only is it the right thing to do, but it's the right thing for the business to do as well. And I think that can help us as HR professionals help make our workplaces fairer, better, and more humane. Yes, clearly people analytics is there to help drive productivity and performance as well, and business outcomes. But I think these people outcomes, I think, are really important. You know, one thing you were surprised about employer brand, I was quite surprised about retention. A lot of the organisations that I've worked with, typically a use case that they'll tend to get started with is retention. It's relatively easy to quantify what the ROI is on it. There's some great use cases out there. I think there's one in the report actually around Nielsen. You know, they determined that a 1% increase in attrition was worth $5 million. So again, you kind of got that business case then to go away and understand what's causing attrition and develop programs to solve for it. But my hypothesis is that retention isn't necessarily the most sexy thing to talk about, and that's possibly why people don't highlight it as much in their LinkedIn profiles. And I think that's what makes this such an interesting piece of research. Actually, is because it's a unique data set. It's more quantitative rather than qualitative, which is how many of these research studies are put together. And actually, you're just looking at the information that's there in people's profiles. So yeah, I was quite interested about that.
Well, I think perhaps another explanation could be with productivity and performance first, or as the number two here, productivity and performance may actually be the leading indicator of retention. And so by focusing on getting the leading indicator right, then hopefully you end up moving the ultimate result of keeping people longer or keeping them happier.
And I think you can also use the analytics to try and identify, particularly with network analytics, you know, employees at risk of burnout. You know, so then you're actually trying to solve the problems of retention rather than just starting with the actual retention itself. I think we could probably talk about this all day, but we probably need to move on. So to the next section really is in terms of how to build a data-driven culture. You know, we've talked about some of the top ways there, and you know, Sarah, you particularly talked about some of the top ways that HR leaders are using data and the business problems that they're trying to solve with it. You know, what we want to think about in this section a little bit more is how companies and HR leaders are structuring these people analytics teams. You know, what skill sets are needed for the teams, and the really critical thing, how do you build that data-driven culture?
Absolutely. So with that, we'll share a little bit about what it takes to structure an HR data analytics team. And I'll actually use LinkedIn's internal people analytics team as an example. So if you look at LinkedIn's internal analytics team, they need to do three things really well. First, deeply understand the business in a consultative manner. The team reports directly to the CHRO and has a deep foundational understanding of the talent questions they are challenged with solving. Second, The team needs to be equipped to tackle complex research questions, which draw on an increasingly wide range of technical skills. Many long-standing HR analytics teams started with a backdrop of organizational psychology, but in the era of big data, they're extending their skill portfolio to be able to tackle new data sets, analyze new types of data, and take on new research questions. This has continually expanded the portfolio of what it takes on the research side. Third, teams need to be able to continually scale accessibility to analyses so that the ones that have already been solved by the small people analytics teams can then be self-served and accessible to the entire business. And that way the people analytics team can move on to tackle the next wave of questions. This data capability requires capabilities in data structuring and scalable visualizations. Balancing these three skills is particularly critical because applying talent analytics effectively requires multiple disciplines working toward a single goal. And often where we see companies fall down is companies that over-focus on one of the areas. Yeah. For example, over-focusing on research, and then the benefits of that research don't necessarily land in the business, or over-focusing on the consultative side and then not developing enough of the scalability to be able to make it work at scale. Or
over-focusing on the data.
Exactly. And that's the most common.
That is the most common. And not actually answering a question that the business even cares about. So, come up with some great insights, but no one really cares because it's not an important problem. So yeah, you said you've got to have that nice balance between those three areas.
So this gives the high level, but we also drilled into the data on our platform to understand the specific skills that HR analytic teams are building. So here you see the three key skill sets that you need while trying to build up your team. And this is, as we mentioned, based on data that is actually resident across the LinkedIn platform. So it's a composite of all the skill sets people are building today. In the case of LinkedIn, we have a larger team for our internal people analytics team, and as a result, we have more resources to put behind them. But even smaller organizations with leaner teams can start creating a more data-driven culture by focusing on core skill sets in these three areas.
Yeah, and I think as you highlighted, Sarah, the big organizations have that luxury, as it were, to try and build all this within a team and not necessarily leverage skills from elsewhere in the organization or partners from outside. When you're working with a smaller team, in some ways that increases the need to have some level of basic data literacy across all your non-data experts. We really need to improve data literacy across HR, and I think that's a challenge for many organizations. And that means that the data then is more easily accessible for HR leaders to get their questions answered, and business leaders as well. Maybe with a smaller team, the key here is to focus on the few decisions that really matter, the real business questions that matter, where you can have impact, and lean into those. And as you're going to show later, for a lot of companies, the big decisions can be around geolocation decisions as well. For example, do you put your engineering hub in San Francisco, or do you distribute your workforce more across other locations that you've got within a country or across the world? And that is a focus for many analytics teams. Every wave of decisions that you do, you have to figure out the most important pieces of data. That can be people data, that can also be business data, that can be data that's outside the organization, that can be new data that you need to create. And you need to make that readily available to the team. A lot of this is thinking about the business challenges, as we've both touched upon. This is the first mantra of people analytics: start with the business problem, and then asking what is the data that we could potentially get to give me insights to help solve that problem. And this is one of the misnomers, I think, around people analytics. Not everyone within HR needs to learn how to bring data together to clean it and manage it. Yes, everyone in HR needs to be a bit more data literate and be prepared to ask the right questions, I think, with the business. Actual cleaning and managing the data, that's a specialist job. And we're seeing some of that talent, an influx of that talent into HR. But if you have someone on the team that goes, then you can focus on some of the bigger questions.
Yeah, one last thing I'll mention here is, even though we've spoken about the skill set of an HR analytics team, it is definitely possible to dive into HR analytics without even having a dedicated analytics team. If you recall the data that we shared earlier, across every industry, only about half of the companies with HR analytic capabilities actually have HR analytic teams. Without an HR analytics teams, you are more likely to lean on off-the-shelf analytics products rather than build proprietary models. And as you mentioned, more likely to pick and choose the questions that really matter. And that alone will get you a long way. After all, we're headed toward the new world of clicks, not code.
So we're going to look at how to build that data-driven culture within HR. Now, there's probably quite a lot that we could have put here. I think the really important thing is communicate the purpose and the value and the benefit of analytics in HR. I think that's good. Almost set a mission statement within the team. I think that's really good for the people analytics team itself because it helps them mobilize around a common goal. But it's really good for the organization as well because then they understand what the team does and what it doesn't do. And one of the challenges that I see of a lot of people analytics teams is everyone just thinks that they're there to do reporting and provide bits of data to various people within the organization. Second point I think you wanted to talk about was the learning side, I think.
Yeah, so creating a culture of learning. Analytics will probably get some HR teams thrilled and some members of the team thrilled, and some will probably be quite scared because it is a vast difference from how HR teams have operated in the past. But the reality is that the crux of being successful in a data-driven HR organization is having a strong handle on what questions to ask. And that really starts with a mindset of curiosity. And that mindset of curiosity can help instill the right culture. Even in the top performing HR analytics organizations, no single individual encompasses all the skills listed on the prior page. So the culture of learning is largely one of creating the right environment to ask questions, having specialists in the right areas to be able to draw from, and then providing platforms to shore up knowledge gaps on a more personalized basis where folks need it.
Yeah, I think if you find someone that's got all those skills, lock them down. They're either a unicorn or they're one of the only people in the world that's kind of got all those skills. And I think it's really important that we do improve the data literacy as HR and we make training and learning available clearly for people within people analytics teams, but also people within HR who want to learn more about it so they can be more comfortable, more confident with it. And I think the other area where organisations can do is when they're hiring people into HR, make analytical capability or data literacy one of the key components of that approach. Bringing in people who've kind of got that comfort with that, I think is a good way of doing that. So I'm sure we could talk about how to build a data-driven culture a bit more. But we're on to the fourth area of the webcast now, which is how we apply analytics to answer critical talent questions. Introducing an analytics function into HR, it goes beyond simply investing in talent with the right skills and identifying the key business areas. You also need to understand where you can apply it in a practical sense. So it's all great getting to lots of nice, interesting insights, but you need to be able to take action on those insights and actually measure the outcomes of that as well. So the key to success in utilizing data is understanding how to apply it to your business, your needs, and your organizational goals. There's lots of great case studies out there from what various organizations have done with people analytics, and it's great to learn from, but you must apply it as relevant within your own organization. And whether that's the recruiter, the HR business partner, the VP of HR, the learning development consultant, the head of people analytics, it's HR professionals that are using data and insights to help make a business case, highlight gaps, have strategic conversations with senior leadership, and maybe use that data to improve their own performance as well and their behavior around their teams. Access to analytics makes HR professionals more efficient in their job, can have more impactful conversations with people within the business and with each other, frankly, and provides them with the tools to elevate their position within the organisation. The vision really should be to make analytics, and that's what I really like about what you're doing at LinkedIn, make analytics available in a digestible format that is simple to access so the general HR practitioner or the recruiter can easily reference and use it. As far as I'm concerned, what I believe the central goal should always be, how can we answer our toughest, most impactful questions with data?
Perfect. So with that, let's talk about some of the questions that we find HR professionals asking. we have had the benefit of working with our customers across a whole host of talent questions, and these are some of the ones that we tend to see coming up most often from talent leaders like you. Some of the biggest questions we see are, first, which companies are we gaining talent from and losing talent to? What skills will our company need in the future? What are we seeing emerging in other companies that we look at as best practice? Where should we open our next office? Or if we're not actually looking to open an office, where should we open the next rec or the next set of recs to be able to take advantage of local talent dynamics? These are the types of questions where you as talent professionals are really helping to shape the future of your organizations. We've talked a lot about how one of the biggest challenges for adopting talent analytics was the accessibility of data historically. Getting accurate data in a way that is actionable and helps you build data-driven talent strategies is one of the primary reasons why we undertook the effort to build LinkedIn Talent Insights. I'm very excited to share with you a little bit more about LinkedIn Talent Insights. LinkedIn Talent Insights is a new self-service talent analytics product that gives you and your entire team access to real-time data and insights on talent pools and companies across the world. LinkedIn has 500 million members, and LinkedIn Talent Insights is powered by the millions of real-time actions our members take every day. So in effect, it gives a full view into the professional workforce across the world. The Talent Pools report lets you see instantly trends and movement across the talent marketplace with access to real-time supply and demand data of talent. You can see, for example, the total number of software engineers in New York, or where there might be a hidden gem city where demand is low and supply is high for the talent you might need more, or where people are migrating to and from. The Company Insights report gives you a real-time look at who you're gaining talent from and losing talent to, and who your competitors are gaining talent from and losing talent to. This helps you build a deeper knowledge on your priority markets and helps you understand how your workforce compares to your competitors so that you can plan for the talent you need today and the talent you need for the future. With LinkedIn Talent Insights, you can bring actionable insights to the table in conversations with your leadership team, that CEO that the CHRO is increasingly getting influence with, and advise on key business decisions with reliable, validated talent data. But the product is really better understood by being able to see it. So here's a screenshot of the talent pool report in the LinkedIn Talent Insights product. This allows you to dive into everything from where talent is going to the level of hiring demand at really any level of granularity that makes sense for your business. You can also make your focus even deeper by adding specific skills to the job titles you're looking for in the left-hand column, and therefore dynamically be able to see how the talent characteristics are changing. So how are people using the data from LinkedIn Talent Insights? 5 key use cases that we're seeing so far from customers, although realistically, the range of uses for Talent Insights go well beyond these 5. Based on our customers today, these top 5 use cases are, first, hiring strategy, which is using Talent Insights to inform your recruiting strategy and set expectations with hiring managers based on dynamics of the talent pool. The second is employer branding, which is using Talent Insights to identify target audiences, create campaigns, and allocate branding budget in a way that's tailored to the talent pools that you most need to attract. Third is competitive intelligence. This is something I'm really excited about because Talent Insights gives unprecedented visibility into peer companies and industry leaders and kind of how talent is shifting across different companies. Fourth is geolocation decisions. This means using Talent Insights to understand how the talent market and competition vary by region to support location decisions, anything from that next new headquarters all the way down to how to target a particular requisition. And the fifth is workforce planning, using talent insights to create data-driven plans for talent acquisition, development, and retention. Because often we find when a talent pool is incredibly hard to acquire, that may mean that you need to change what you're hiring for, and that actually has implications on the development, retention, and other expectations of the talent pool. So being able to understand all of that in concert can help the workforce plan. But as I mentioned before, the Talent Insights product is best shown by being able to see it live. So I will now attempt to do a live demo of the product.
Yeah,
I've been told.
And while you're firing up, Sarah, I had the good fortune of being in Sydney and Paris last year for the LinkedIn Talent Intelligence experiences, and I spoke to some of the pilot customers, and it was a powerful thing. Was talking to some of the heads of talent acquisition. They were saying that their companies had made different decisions about where they were going to locate a new team based on the insights that this product gave them.
Completely agree, and I'll actually show you two of those. So first use case we'll share is hiring strategy. Autodesk was an early customer of Talent Insights. Jennifer Kopatz, a senior engineering recruiter, was tasked with finding candidates that had the 11 must-have skills the hiring manager needed. She knew this would be tough, and she wanted to set expectations with a hiring manager. So she started out with our talent pool report to understand the talent pool for senior software engineers in San Francisco. So started out by saying she wanted senior software engineers in the San Francisco Bay Area. And you can see up here, the number of professionals updates dynamically. So she can see there's 27,000 senior software engineers in San Francisco. But as I mentioned before, her hiring manager had very specific skill requirements. So Jennifer went and started including the different skills that needed to be part of this rec: Java, C++, and there are many more here.
Lots in. And I think, again, it's so easy to use. I mean, even I could use it, which says quite a lot, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, I think back to the clicks, not code. So Jennifer typed in the skills that she required for this particular search. And she wanted someone who had all of these skills. Click apply. And you see the talent pool that had been 27,000 professionals is now only 413, which immediately gave Jennifer pause and made her think, wow, this may be a really hard requisition to fill. Not only that, she noticed that the hiring demand for this talent pool, which is based on a lot of signals from our platform, is very hard to hire. And so she realized that this would also be, not only were there not that many of them, they're quite difficult to engage. And they have a fairly short median tenure, which means they may not stay very long once they're there. But she wanted to understand the landscape to get a feel for how successful she might be in attacking this talent pool. So if I click on the company tab, you can see which employers are hiring this talent pool and which employers have the pools of these individuals already. So she looked at the top employers. If you look here, Apple actually has a reasonably high attrition rate for this particular talent pool. So she decided to look at her competitiveness against some of these employers. So if I go back to the Talent Insights product, dig into the company report this time, and look at Autodesk, you can see the number of professionals at Autodesk, generate the report, and you can see right here the distribution of Autodesk's workforce, and more importantly, where they are winning talent from and who they are losing talent to. So if I click into that to drill down a little bit more, you can see that Autodesk loses 2.3 times as many professionals to Apple as they gain. So this gave Jennifer some quantitative information to be able to go back to the hiring manager and have a conversation with the hiring manager about how to relax some of the criteria from the required skills in order to get to a talent pool that felt a little bit more reasonable to hire.
Yeah.
This approach has been so successful that Autodesk has actually rolled this out across a much wider set of their recruiters, and it's become a common part of their intake process with their recruiters. So let me also give an example of an employer branding use case, because as we talked about earlier, that's an area that we feel is emerging for data. In this case, I'm going to speak a little bit about Intel. Intel was also an early customer of Talent Insights. They were struggling to hire software engineers in Gdansk, Poland, which is where they had a big facility in Europe, and they wanted to run an employer branding campaign, but didn't want to spread their budget too thin and wanted to get the maximum return on investment for their employer branding campaign. So they started out by trying to understand the market. So they looked for software engineers in Gdansk. Turns out that my spelling of Gdansk may not be perfect.
Well, they say never work with children,
Yeah,
animals, or live demos.
I know. And you can see there's 2,000 professionals, software engineers in Gdansk. Then if they look at the companies that are employing, they are already the largest employer of software engineers in Gdansk, and largest employer by far. So realistically, their brand is probably already reasonably strong in Gdansk. So this prompted them to wonder if they may be better off by putting their employer branding campaign elsewhere in Poland. So if you widen the criteria to be all of Poland rather than just Gdansk, and then look at the locations, you can see here that while there are 2,000 professionals in Gdansk, with Intel as the largest employer, there are almost over twice as many in both Krakow and Warsaw. So this enabled Intel to then drill down on both of these locations. So they started with Warsaw. Include Warsaw. Exclude all of Poland. And when they drilled down into Warsaw, they saw there were a couple of employers with over 100 software engineers. And then after that, then the pool becomes pretty small and pretty spread out. They also looked at Krakow and did a comparison and found in Krakow, there were actually about 10 employers where the bulk of the talent was concentrated. And you see here 10 employers that have over 100 software engineers. And so what Intel actually did with this information is they put physical billboards outside the locations of a few of these employers where they felt like they would have a strong chance of being able to hire software engineers. And after they did that, they saw a 20% increase in visits to Intel's career pages. So what I love about this is it's taking access to talent data to then use for an analog campaign that then saw digital conversion. And I love the creativity of this, and I love the result story, and they were able to get a real hard quantitative ROI out of this.
It's a powerful story, a very powerful story, and both great use cases that demonstrate how data and insights can be used across a variety of HR areas. And I know obviously the two that you showed were kind of talent acquisition ones. Interesting employer brand, obviously after the initial analysis placed that ninth in those areas. But I don't know if you want to say anything about some of the other use cases that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, the use cases that I shared were hiring strategy and employer branding, but you can see that we drew on competitive intelligence for both of those decisions. And really it's that deep knowledge of which companies are hiring and that competitive talent flow that underpin everything. And you can see that in Intel's path to make the decision on employer brand, it informed their strategy of the Gdansk location. And so, if you think about like a larger world in which Intel's thinking about, its geolocation strategy, that the possibilities are truly endless. And then finally, on the workforce planning, the Autodesk example just shared, the narrow slice of setting expectations with a hiring manager. But if you take that a few steps forward, if Jennifer then were to completely change and relax the criteria for hiring, that would have implications on which skills the employees would need to learn on the job versus which ones they would be expected to come in with. And that might actually impact the workforce plan of what tenure and what types of skills you bring folks in with, what you develop as you go. And so you can really see, even with these two use cases, which were a hiring strategy and employer branding, the full range. And I guess one more thing I'll mention is, even though the two examples I shared were both kind of different flavors of tech and software engineering, in reality, we are seeing companies of every industry, every talent type start to use talent insights to drive talent decisions.
I certainly wish I had it when I was a recruiter back in the late 1990s, that's for sure.
Five clicks to an answer?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So we thank you very much, everyone. I'm looking at the screen because I'm looking at some of the questions that you've been asking as Sarah and I have been talking. So firstly, thank you very much for the questions, and we're going to spend some time trying to answer some of those now. Sarah, I'm going to address this one to you, and I could probably add a little bit on it as well. Perfect. In terms of when we talked about how you construct the team, how do you separate the reporting from analytics within a people analytics or HR analytics team?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly it comes back to the scale of the team that you have, and I think because these skill sets tend to be somewhat different for managing reporting and the tools and programs elements versus the research and analytics. We in the larger teams, we do tend to see these as separate disciplines, sometimes managed by different individuals. But in those cases, then we tend to see a continual feedback loop between the two. I think the challenge that companies have is, as they start to get more specialized skill sets across each of those, then they lose the connectivity of making sure that the research is being done in a way that can ultimately scale. And so I think having the folks that are running the reporting or scalable tools as part of the conversation, as soon as some of the research starts to hit the tipping point of potentially being ready for scale, then that will help maximize the chance that the research that's being done can then translate into scalable tools down the road.
Yeah, and I've certainly seen companies that actually take reporting out of the people analytics team and put it in another team, and I've seen others that actually have it as a distinct function within the team as well. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. But I think part of the education process to go out to the business and to go out to the wider HR community is that reporting and analytics are different. Yep. Yes, data is a key component of both, but they are different. Yep. And so you just need to be very clear in terms of what the team does and the difference between the two, I think, when you're communicating that. So lots of great questions coming in. This is an interesting one. So, what advice do you have for a recruiter trying to get more resourcing for analytics? So let's say they've got a product like this and they have other things. If you're head of talent acquisition, how do you get more resourcing from the business to actually ramp up your analytics?
So this may sound like a tongue-in-cheek answer, but I would actually use Talent Insights. We actually have seen it. A use case can be using the data in the platform to understand, the magnitude of the growth, the skill sets that are required, and then being able to use that to then compare against what your team has today. So I think that's one. I think second is focusing on one or two really critical business needs that aren't able to be fully answered without an investment in analytics. And so rallying around the couple of business needs that will truly make the case can help executive leadership make the decision.
I think that's the key thing, actually focusing on the business questions, finding some insights on those, with actionable insights, and then having an impact, and then you create the momentum for analytics. But I've seen organisations. There's a famous case study from Virgin Media around, around employer brand. They felt they were providing such a bad candidate experience that actually it was impacting on their customer loyalty. So people that were customers were applying for jobs and then actually moving off to a competitor organisation because they had such a bad experience. And actually, they actually went to the consumer analytics team. They actually leveraged the data from the consumer analytics team, brought their recruiting data to that, and they found that, yes, they did have a problem, and it was costing them somewhere around $6 million a year, basically. People were going into the recruitment process and having, as I said, such a bad experience, they were leaving within 4 weeks and moving off to one of the competitor organisations. So that insight helped them, refine their candidate experience program and actually then look to actually provide such a great process that actually non-customers actually want to sign up to become customers of Virgin Media as well. And as you said, it was because they focused on the business, a right business question that was important to the business and had impact. I suppose back to the typical size of people analytics team in a company with a top tier people analytics. How big is LinkedIn's team?
LinkedIn's team is actually fairly lean. It's about 15, 20 folks. And that's intentional because the goal is to tackle a couple of critical business challenges and then scale throughout the business. But we see teams of all shapes and sizes depending on the complexity of the workforce, how globally distributed it is, and the nature of what that team takes on versus the rest of the organization. LinkedIn as a whole is quite data-driven, so I think the people analytics team benefits from having an organization that is able to self-serve a lot as well.
And I think a lot of it depends what's in the people analytics team. So particularly if reporting is in, some of the bigger organisations have got upwards of 100 people within the team. And certainly I'm seeing teams that are doubling in size, tripling in size. In one example, Capital One, I think, has tripled their team over the last 2 years from 25 to 75 people. We're just about out of time. I was going to ask, we could probably continue with these questions all day. So we just want to close with 3 key takeaways that can help you be a people analytics champion within your own organisation. If you haven't heard already, start with the business challenge, not the data. Really focus on, if you're getting started out, just identify what are the key business challenges your organisation faces and actually what are the data that I can bring to answer that. The second one really is analytics is a team sport. When you're getting started, if you can leverage resources, data scientists perhaps, data specialists from elsewhere in the organisation like marketing, and data, like the Virgin Media example that I gave there, from outside HR, then that can really help you have an impact as well. And then I think the third one particularly, and I'd say this is important for even when you're actually quite well developed, have a business sponsor for every analytics project that you're working on. The business sponsor that actually wants the insights from this particular project and is prepared to actually action those insights as well. Sponsorship and managing stakeholders, very, very important as well. So, Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you. Any final words from you?
I think we are just at the outset of a new era of being able to understand all of the use cases that companies will come up with. And so, while we shared some tidbits today about what it takes to develop a capability and use cases, I think, if we come back and do this 5 years from now, we will be in a completely different space and companies will innovate in ways that we can't even imagine today. So I'm excited to see what you all do with this information and where you take your businesses going forward.
And thank you very much for joining us today. you.